from the Social Care Future inquiry, where a lot of people who draw on social care were describing a kind of fairly different reality for themselves, in which the support or services that they were receiving were often struggling to prioritize those things that were most important to them. People were often in situations where those things kind of weren't accessible, or people had very little choice about the supports and services they received. And so we identify this kind of gap between what we all want from home and what people's experience often is. And then in the first breakout session in the morning around people living in their own original homes, as it were, we talked about why that might be, why people's experience is like that, what we saw as some of the challenges and obstacles, and started to think about what might be some of the solutions. But this afternoon we want to focus on that much more. You won't be surprised, Tim, that commissioning came up a bit this morning. You see, we've got Helen Sanderson here, so she's primarily responsible for raising the commissioning issues. No, I'm only joking. We did have a number of commissioners with us in the morning as well, who were all expressing that they wanted commissioning to achieve the things that people were describing as their aspirations in the morning, but pointing to some of the struggles and challenges they're experiencing in trying to do that. Obviously, money came up a bit because it's a bit of a problem, isn't it? But we primarily talked about issues other than money, I think it's fair to say.
That's
is
really
that
helpful.
all right as a quick catch up for you?
It's super helpful. I'll try not to answer it now, but I think, yeah. When you said you had other commissioners and they were kind of wanting to do that, I was going to say, well, why haven't they? But probably shouldn't say there's
they might
the
be
challenge.
In this session as well, Tim. So I guess they might answer you that question. I hope, folks, so hopefully that was a useful kind of catch up for yourselves in terms of where we've been during the day and where we're going. But I'm going to hand over to Isaac now to introduce the next bit.
Hi, everybody. And once again, thank you all for joining. We have two session listeners, which are Tim and Helen, who Helen joined us this morning. Tim, welcome. I probably am going to go with Tim first and then Helen. And really this afternoon, what we want to do is look at building on this morning's issues and ideas. How do we move forwards? What opportunities, glimpses for a better future can be possible, and what actions can we take? So I'm going to ask each listener to reflect on those. And Tim, over to you. Do you want to introduce yourself and then reflect on what we've asked?
Yeah, so for those that don't know me, I'm Tim Baverstock. So I'm Deputy Director of Adult Social Care down in Somerset, in the Southwest. I would hope, and as Martin was alluding to, I'm also Lead Commissioner down in Somerset. So yeah, please don't criticise me for that. What I would say is that I hope that some of you will be aware that Somerset is quite an innovative county. We do have many different approaches that we're looking at in terms of how we support people. Most of them, thankfully, led by people themselves rather than led by me or my teams. And I think when it comes to supporting people in their own home and kind of answering your initial kind of question, Isaac, I think that is the key. Is I've never quite understood why, whether they be health or care commissioners, feel that they can provide templates of care, ways of looking after people, ways of supporting people that they think are right, without them being led by the people themselves. And that's why I quite enjoy being in Social Care Future gatherings and other similar kind of gatherings. And I think what we need to understand is what our people want. It won't always be the same thing. I take your point, Martin, earlier on around having two different groups and how you've split this, but actually we have very similar in Somerset, where we have many people who actually want to live maybe in a shared setting or in some kind of shared support setting, and then we have equally many other people who just want to live independently or with their family, or however it may be. But that illustrates the point that it isn't one size fits all. I won't go on too much in my opening dialogue, Isaac, but I'd be really keen for us to explore how things like personal budget, not just in social care, but in other elements, can help do that and help support that for people in their own home, if that's appropriate. But I'd also like to, if you give me the chance later on, to maybe talk around some of the things we've done in Somerset. So we've had clients, and why wouldn't they have their own mortgage, buy their own property in conjunction with their family, etc. And I think there's many different ways to achieve what it is that we want to achieve. So I will let you hand over to Helen, I'm sure, first of all. And hi, Helen, again.
Thank you, Tim. And Helen, over to you.
I think that there's some things that we can all be part of, which is when we're planning our own lives or supporting other people to plan, whether that's the role of a social worker, a friend or a family member, using something like the support sequence that makes us think about, could technology help here? How can community help here? How can friends and family help here? So we're not going straight for traditional providers in the way that we think about that. So one small change, if every social worker in the country did that, we'd have a much bigger investment in community and a much bigger investment in technology, and those things feel important to do. I think we should be celebrating what is brilliant about social care future and social care, which is we are able to do work that has a purpose, that makes a difference, which is different to working in Amazon and different to working in Tesco. So I think looking at value-based recruitment that celebrates what's different around purpose and contribution, and that we can bring people from other sectors outside of health and care into this workforce. And I know it's challenging as well, but we have got something very different to offer people, which is love and connection and work that matters. And I don't know many people in Amazon that would say that. So introducing value-based recruitment, whether you are funding your own care, whether you have a personal budget, or whether you're an organisation, feels important. I'd like us to rethink volunteering. I'd like us to move from seeing volunteering as good Samaritans, doing good to other people, to an investment in our own well-being. And I think what community circles are doing around a 2-hour club is to say, wouldn't it be amazing if everybody invested 2 hours a month in their well-being? Because what we know from the 5 ways to well-being is connection and giving help your well-being. So I think there's an opportunity to reposition volunteering as this is the rent for living in communities and on this planet, and that we give back to each other, and actually that increases our well-being. So a simple thing that could increase all of our well-being. Now, Tim, I'm going to be controversial. I think it should be illegal to commission task and time services. I believe that's like commissioning the fire service and only paying them when they're out fighting fires. And I also think that CQC should regulate commissioning, because at the moment there is no influence on commissioners other than trying to balance budgets, which I know is very, very hard. But if we had some greater sense of standards on what was okay about commissioning and what was not okay about commissioning, I think we might be in a different place. And then, of course, the integration stuff that we talked about earlier. So we don't have reablement separated from home care, separated from district nursing, and separated for social prescribing. Thank you. Martin, getting off my soapbox now.
Thanks. So please, folks, as you've been listening to this, 1 or 2 people have started putting things in the chat. Please put more in, because before we break up to discuss this stuff, let's explore some of these things a bit further. Tim, Daphne asks, as a self-funder and a carer, am I included in this discussion? And I'm sure the answer to that is yes. But how do self-funders kind of fit here?
So I think, and just picking up Helen's challenge at the same time, I think, because I think the two are linked. What you need to remember is that commissioners are responsible for conditions across the whole, not just for things that local authority funds, etc. So giving self-funders the right choice, supporting them to make the right options, should absolutely be part of good social care commissioning in an area. You'll be pleased to hear, or kind of slightly pleased to hear, I think, that obviously with the new assurance that's coming along the line for adult social care, commissioning is going to be a big part of that assurance process. So, and it should be CQC doing that. I know they're still working through the details. I kind of welcome that. I think it'll be challenging for us in Somerset, but if they look at the right things, I share your skepticism, Helen, and it links that self-funder point as well, as, you know, if they just look at things like cost, sufficiency in the market, or time and task element, then it'll be a useless exercise. What they need to look at is how commissioners are promoting choice, across how they're developing their markets. I don't like the phrase markets, but I use it because that's my world, so apologies. And how they're encouraging providers and their staff to think differently. And that doesn't matter whether that's a self-funder or a local authority funded package of care. Just agreeing with Helen, I think we've got a lot of work to do with practitioners, particularly social workers, in terms of are they asking the right questions, Helen, on a lot of occasions, which is why sometimes they get the wrong answers. So I would agree with that. And I guess that perspective of commissioners sitting on high and deciding what are the right levels of care, what are the elements that we need in a, they don't happen in Somerset particularly. We very much leave it to individuals themselves. So, you know, we've now got, people will be aware, we've got one of the, well, we have got the biggest micro provider market in the country in Somerset. And we've only done that by allowing people to have choice. And
could I explore that with you a bit, Tim?
Yeah.
So not everybody will be aware of this. So one of the things that came up in the earlier session was it felt a little bit like one size fits all, you know, so that you didn't have very many options, whether you were supported at home or supported in accommodation with support of some kind. You know, it felt there were very few options. Now, this morning we started with Jane Williams doing a video for us, who's supported by Claudia and other micro providers in Somerset. And many people were saying, you know, how much they like the sound of that, as it were. But I noticed recently, when the white paper came out, that David Brindle, the former Guardian journalist, was a little bit sniffy, I thought, in one of his responses. So he said, "Oh, well, the white paper just said there are all these other there are all these models, but they're very kind of small scale and niche, and they're not going to become mainstream." And yet, you have a lot of people in villages in Somerset providing support on a micro basis. How do you do that? What do people need to do to make that happen?
I mean, I think what you need to, and it links to some of Helen's models as well, actually, to be honest, that Helen and her teams have devised. So I think what you need to do is you need to make the conditions right, and hopefully people on this call will understand, and by all means put in the chat if you want to ask any more, is you need the authorities to let go, and that's the only way where you can propagate that. And just to give you an idea of the scale, so we're up to about 20,000 hours now. I'm sorry to talk in hours, but I've got to, because I'm trying to quantify it. But we're up to about 20,000 hours now delivered by our micro provision. They're not mine, they're not directed by me, I don't fund them, I don't tell them how to run their care packages, I don't tell them how to work with the clients. And that's the key, Martin, but the only way you can do it is to promote them. There are lots of, I can be slightly incorrect on, there are lots of sniffy people out there who will call them cowboy carers, or who may well say, well, they're not regulated, so, you know, but actually in Somerset, what we have is we have networks. We're a big county. We have networks where they all come together, they sign up to a quality framework that they've devised with clients and themselves, so that they regulate that quality of care. And I go back to when we started, when I always say, actually, you know, to be honest, some of those micro providers don't provide care at all. They might be doing other things. They might be doing shopping. They might be mowing the lawn. They might be walking the dog. You don't ask for a regulated provision when you ask a gardener to come in, do you, and mow your lawn. And I think, you know, it's about building relationships, friendships, working with people. And I forgot to pick up on Helen's other point, which I would absolutely agree with. If you want a happy workforce and you want people to work in this sector, which we know is a massive problem at the moment, all of our data over the last couple of years tells us that people who support people in their own home get an awful lot out of that when it's a flexible type of support. We've had people from within our county council seconded into traditional care providers during this crisis. And they were ringing me on numerous occasions and saying, Tim, I've got to be at my next call in 10 minutes time, and the journey time is 45 minutes away. That type of provision doesn't help anybody. It doesn't help recruit, doesn't help the people you support because they don't feel valued. And so micro providers helps to move away from that, as does some of Helen's other models, which we're you know, trying to explore with some of our more formal market now around locality-based teams, where I don't tell them what order they need to do their calls in. I don't commission things singly. They need to work with the community and with the clients. So I think there's lots that we can still do, Martin. We're not perfect in Somerset by any means, as you'll know if you look at some of our stats, but we are trying things, and we're trying them because people are asking for it, and that's the way to do it, isn't it? Is to work with what helps support people better.
Thanks, Tim. Could we explore the CQC part a little bit? So I think Liz, it was said you like the idea of CQC regulating commissioners. Well, you will have your wish very soon, Liz. They are going to do that like they did before. However, when I talk to people about this, there's some worry about that. There's some worry about how they regulate commissioners, what they think is good commissioning behaviour and bad commissioning behaviour. So that's one issue. But I think, Helen, you've probably got issues as well about the role of the regulator in supporting or hindering the growth of new, flexible, better models. So can we explore both those issues a little bit? Tim, if CQC is going to commission you, going to regulate you, yeah. What do you think are the key things they should be regulating on, or assuring? I think is the word, isn't it? Helen, what do you think CQC need to do differently from what they do now to make it possible for things like wellbeing teams, micros, and others to flourish? Let's go with Helen first.
CQC recently did something called their sandbox innovation, where they invited different kind of innovative non-traditional providers, including cooperatives, to work with them on how CQC would need to change. And I must say that, and I think they've done great work there. I think one of the challenges, well, there's two things from my perspective, and I'm suddenly become more conscious that this is being recorded. One is not all the inspectors necessarily work from the spirit of CQC, and there's lots of myths and legends that says actually, staff have got to have 6 weekly supervision. Well, that's not in the law, and it's not in the regulation, and it's not in the CLOEs. And they actually say you need to demonstrate that staff are well supported. But there's this myth amongst providers who believe that. And there's some inspectors that behave like that's the truth. And then in their personal provider information return, which providers have to submit 6 weeks before they're inspected, it asks how many supervisions have you done over the last year, which kind of reinforces the view that supervisions are the right thing. So I think going back to and stripping out all of those elements that aren't directly what the CLOEs say, which gives people more flexibility. So I'm very happy to demonstrate that my staff were well supported. We did that without doing supervision at all, and we got outstanding for well led. So it's also making sure that CQC is sharing and celebrating organisations who are delivering the CLOEs but doing it in a very different way.
Right, so that's something I think that's an issue that we're going to have to take forward as part of our movement, really, because if we're concerned that regulation is sometimes hindering the growth of the stuff that we want to see, we're going to need to find a way of engaging with CQC and considering with CQC things like if some of their inspectors are not following the spirit of their policies, etc., what they can do about that. So that's a kind of practical issue that won't be easy to sort out, but something that we'll need to engage with, I think. Tim, can we come on to you? And what if CQC were going to say these are the 3 or 4 things we're going to assure commissioners on? What would your favourites be?
Well, I'd like them to understand the locality they're inspecting to start off with, Martin, because everywhere's going to be different. Yeah. And I think there's a really good comment in the chat actually just around, and it's absolutely what I would agree with. If you look at the changes that were made to some of the CQC inspections of some regulated settings and care homes, etc., probably just pre-pandemic, but now, post as we go forward as well, they've only just cottoned on to the fact that really what you should be asking is you should be asking the people that are receiving the service, what their views on the care and
Tim, can you just hang on a sec?
Yeah.
Daphne, just to say, I've seen your hand, so as soon as Tim finishes, I'll bring you in if that's okay. You don't have to keep it up there. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, no worries. So I think, so my first ask of CQC is if they're going to inspect commissioning is you need to talk to the people, self-funders as well as local authority funded people who want to and require using services. So whether they will do that, I share Helen's slight skepticism in that I think from what I've seen so far, it could be quite I can say this, can't I, a tick box exercise if we're not careful. And I'm really worried about that. So my answer to you, Martin, is it needs to be much more of a conversation, which I know is really difficult for regulators, but they have moved in the right direction in some of those other settings. So I am hopeful that they could do that. And I'm just picking up Luke's point in the chat as well. You know, we have gone back to central government. I've been part of some of those groups that were offshoots of some of the things that Helen describes in terms of working on the white paper and some of those other elements. And actually regulation, the type of care that we've introduced in Somerset, some of it, as Martin said, some of it features in the white paper, but we need to continue to shift that power base. And again, if I can say one thing that I think is really important, Martin, for this movement is certain big companies have the ear of the government with regard to care and care policy, or have done historically, and we need to shift that power base back to people like you've got on this call here,
Okay.
who receive those services.
We'll come on to that then as an issue. Daphne, just before I bring you in, one thing to say here is that you know, we not overstating this, but we have every 2 weeks we have an hour with Kate Taroney and some other people. And I think we can open up a dialogue on these issues, which I'm sure Kate, we could say to Kate, this is really important. Will you make it happen? So the issues that we're raising today, I think we can probably go to Kate and say, okay, let's work out how we're going to work together on some of these, Kate. She's already invited us and others to be involved in the assurance development process, which we will take up.